College football fans, you've been accustomed to tracking recruiting rankings. In this day and age, the transfer portal rankings now need to be part of your checklist in keeping track of the talent exchange across college football. To help us do it on the USC side, we, of course, have Matt Zemek on the line from Trojans Wire to help us break it all down. Hey, Matt, how's it going today?
It's going good, Mark. There's certainly a lot of activity in and around USC. And, of course, you might have seen the USC football Twitter account, Lincoln Riley himself. They're tweeting out all these fight on emojis, and that means that new players are coming in. But everyone wants the big fish. And as we record this episode on the Voice of College Football, still don't have Caleb Williams. So USC fans are, I think they're in a place of emotional exhaustion, but the fact that Lincoln Riley tweeted the fight on emoji Sunday afternoon, I think that has increased the confidence level that Caleb Williams is coming. Would the big chief, the head coach, tweet out the fight on emojis if he didn't think Caleb Williams was coming? And come on, you can't lead people down a false road. You can't give people false hope. So I think USC fans were given a little extra shot of confidence that Caleb Williams is actually on his way.
Oklahoma fans would argue with you and say we got our shot of hope or confidence when he said he wasn't going to LSU. We read into that at the time, which was
he didn't tweet out any "Go Tigers" tweets.
All right. Well, yes, Caleb Williams, the big, enormous fish, the whale, we'll call him. The other, not for any anatomy reasons, but in context of the conversation here. Going to a few big fish here. We got Travis Dye. We'll get to him in just a second. More immediate is Shane Lee from Alabama, who was the 5th rated linebacker in the country coming out of high school in 2019, and a top selection to Alabama at the time. But now he comes to USC.
Yeah, so I mean, with the Shane Lee pickup in the portal over the weekend, I mean, the big thing there, freshman, so he has 3 years of eligibility. So this is not a 1-year rental. This is a long-term investment, or at least, of course, USC hopes to be able to have him for at least the next 2 years, if not 3. And that's just the kind of thing that points to USC really entrenching itself as a powerhouse program. If there are going to be wobbles, it's going to be 2022, because by 2023, to have Shane Lee in his 2nd year with the program, obviously if everything goes according to plan, you're just going to have a solidified, experienced defense. You're going to get guys with, who have had a lot of snaps at the highest level. You're not just, entrusting newbies to it, uncertain, unknown quantities. No, with Shane Lee, certainly after this 2022 season, assuming that Lincoln Riley and USC can retain him for 2023, I mean, you're already seeing the ceiling rise for this program 2-3 years down the line. You can just see it all in motion.
Take a guy like Shane Lee and his journey at Alabama. This speaks to the overload of talent at Alabama and the layers of depth here. So Shane Lee this past season got into 13 games, but mostly on special teams, backup role, 6 tackles. That's it. 2 years ago in 2019, he was pressed into duty because Dylan Moses and Joshua McMillan got hurt. So 2 guys get hurt. He gets pressed into duty, 86 tackles, 6.5 tackles for loss, 4.5 sacks, a pick for a team that finished by Alabama standards not good at 11-2, number 8 in the country. But that's the type of productivity he can supply for a top 10 team in the country.
Absolutely, and we know how Nick Saban operates. That he's able to cycle these guys through the special teams unit and backup roles, and this is why you play those games against the Citadel the week before the Iron Bowl, to get those guys further down the depth chart, those repetitions, so that when they go into spring ball for the next season, they've had some familiarity, and then they work their way up the ladder within the Alabama system, so that when they get their chance to start, when they're called upon to start, they're ready. They know what to expect. They've been in games. So, so the fact that Shane Lee has been through that process of development under Nick Saban, but because there's the glut of talent and there's the desire to go somewhere else to make sure that he gets a full amount of snaps, a full amount of playing time. But boy, isn't that exactly what you're looking for if you're Lincoln Riley and USC? And let's keep in mind too that Clay Helton was, an atrocious developer of talent. So Nick Saban, exactly the opposite. So USC's kind of catching Shane Lee just at the beginning of his player development arc, the beginning of an upswing, and now you get to coach him up after he's had that foundational experience under Saban. I mean, that's hitting the sweet spot. It's a great transfer portal pickup for USC.
Absolutely. There's no question about that. So he's proven that he can do it as a regular on the big stage in the SEC. Another guy that's proven it even more is on the offensive side of the ball. And of course, that's Travis Dye, the fifth leading rusher in the history of Oregon football, takes his talents to USC.
And yeah, this is another home run. And we've talked to our friends over at Ducks Wire, and you want to follow those guys over at Ducks Wire for their coverage of Oregon. But like they saw what Travis Dye is all about, and it's such a natural fit for a Lincoln Riley offense, isn't it? He loves to get the ball to his running backs in open space. Not just on handoffs, but with plenty of passes in the flat. I mean, we've seen Oklahoma do this. Like that's how Oklahoma beat Ohio State in Columbus a few years ago under Baker Mayfield, that getting the running backs into the flat for short passes out in open space, that's something Ohio State did not have an answer for. So Travis Dye, boy, just plug and play. He's going to fit right into the Lincoln Riley offense, sometimes as a setback, taking a handoff, but a lot of the times catching passes out of the backfield. Joe Moorhead used him well at Oregon, in that dual role. So the versatility of Travis Dye, that's really one of his most outstanding features as a running back. That's exactly what Lincoln Riley's looking for as a running back piece at USC.
For the fans, Matt, of course, these transfers are pulling away and tearing away at the fabric of the allegiance and loyalty and the attachment to these players. But when a Spencer Rattler leaves Oklahoma and goes all the way to South Carolina, and the likelihood that those two teams are going to run into each other, or Jamison Williams, he leaves Ohio State, goes to Alabama. Now there's a high likelihood that they would have run into each other, but it didn't happen. Now he's off to the NFL. So that's one thing. But just here in the last couple of days, we see Jermaine Burton leaving a Georgia team that just beat Alabama in the national championship 2 weeks ago, and he's going to be in winter workouts with that Alabama team now, and probably those two are going to get together in a conference championship game. Travis Dye leaving Oregon. No, they're not arch rivals, USC and Oregon, but there's not real good blood between those two programs. They've met in meaningful games over the past decade, and we covered that when the announcement was made. And certainly from the Oregon feedback, it wasn't taken too well that he would leave to go to USC.
Naturally, and I can't help but think, Mark, that if Oregon had hired an offense-first head coach, would Travis Dye have transferred to USC? Because under Mario Cristobal, I mean, like Travis Dye got plenty of work, he got plenty of opportunities, but we can also say that Mario Cristobal, had a limited vision for what Oregon's offense could be, and of course Travis Dye, even though I'm sure he thinks a lot of Joe Moorhead, like I don't know that for a fact, but like Joe Moorhead's really good as an offensive coordinator. We saw him undress Kerry Combs in Ohio State in week 2 in that great performance for Oregon's offense. The fact that Mario Cristobal was still running that ship at Oregon, and the fact that Anthony Brown was the quarterback, I mean, those were two big limitations. So I'm sure that Travis Dye sized up his situation. He sized up the fact that Bo Nix, not an elite quarterback by any stretch, is going to Eugene. I think he looked at Bo Nix, and he looked at, anticipating Caleb Williams coming to USC under Lincoln Riley, and he weighed his options and he said, Oregon's not where I'm going to maximize my talent if I play in Eugene in 2022. And the people at Duckswire who I talked to, even before Dye made his decision this past Friday, they said, there was a distinct possibility he was going to transfer out. It's just they were hoping it wasn't going to be USC, but like his one foot was already out the door, from what I heard from Duckswire before Friday. And I think that the way Oregon handled its larger situation, the limitations on the Ducks offense in 2021, that shaped Travis Dye's decision. If Oregon really wanted to retain Travis Dye, it needed to get an elite offensive coach, but no, it went with Dan Lanning. And I think that might have been part of the price Oregon had to pay in order to hire Lanning, that Travis Dye was not going to be receptive to that. So I think that's really a key piece of the puzzle that people need to appreciate.
Yeah, Lincoln Riley, known as a pass-happy, offensive-minded guy from a passing game standpoint, but it's underappreciated how much the running game and the running backs thrive under his system. Kennedy Brooks, the most recent, gaining his second 1,000-yard campaign this last offseason. And to your point, also getting out in passing routes and becoming adept at becoming pass receivers, which really makes them desirable at the next level. When running backs can pass block and then help in the passing game as outlets as well, that's certainly a key factor, because there's very, very few Derrick Henrys in the NFL that are going to tote it 25 times.
Yeah, and let's bring up that's a great point you raised, Mark, because what did we just see in the NFL? We saw that epic game between the Bills and the Chiefs, and we saw how, especially the Chiefs, how they get running backs and also receivers. They use running backs and receivers almost interchangeably. That they will hand the ball off to receivers on those jet sweeps. They'll use running backs to get them open down the field in the passing game. Like, that's where football's going. And Andy Reid and Eric Bieniemy, what they do. So if you're a running back and you're thinking about how you maximize your NFL prospects, your NFL ceiling, your NFL paycheck, like, you want to be able to flourish in an Andy Reid style offense. And after watching that game against the Bills, that's the new dream. It's no longer that 1980s world of the big tough running back getting 30 35 carries up the middle, whether it was Marcus Allen or John Riggins or the various other players of yesteryear. That's not where football is anymore. Roger Craig, you're now in this new world where catching passes out of the backfield, it's not a luxury, it's a necessity. It's a bread and butter aspect of modern NFL offense. So if you're Travis Dye, do you want to be at Oregon with Bo Nix as your quarterback and Dan Lanning as your head coach, or you want to be under Lincoln effing Riley at USC? I think that it's really a pretty easy choice. And it goes to the point that USC didn't just hire a great coach. It hired a coach who's known for sexy offense, high octane, like that. And, Pete Carroll didn't provide that, right? Pete Carroll had an elite defense, but he had the infectious personality, which, brought the best talent to LA. And he was able to just play smash mouth with elite athletes such as Reggie Bush, such as Lendale White. But Lincoln Riley, in this modern age, with the transfer portal, with NIL, with all these new cross currents that we see around us, it has to be said, it's not just that USC has the great coach, it has a sexy great coach, where players want to play, where offensive players can maximize their stats, maximize their chances to flourish. Like, if you had Luke Fickell, and Luke Fickell, done an amazing job, got a group of 5 team to the college football playoff, no question, he's really competent. He's really good at what he does. But let's say hypothetically that he went to USC. Would we be seeing this parade of elite transfers such as Travis Dye, such as Shane Lee, such as probably, in the near future, Caleb Williams? Don't think so, right? I think that Lincoln Riley, because of his specific reputation for having elite dynamic offense, that is adding so much more value in the portal and on the recruiting trail compared to any of others, several great head coaches that could have gone to USC, Fickell being one of them.
Travis Dye caught 46 passes last year, so he was shown those running back receiver skills out of the backfield. We got Matt Zemek on the line from Trojans Wire. Head on over there to check out his work on USC football. And yeah, recruiting rankings. Those are typically what's talked about during the offseason, but we need to now add the transfer portal rankings as a barometer of talent acquisition.
Yep. And so, it came out last week that USC, with the Mario Williams acquisition, with other transfer acquisitions, this was before the Shane Lee pickup, also before getting Auburn linebacker Romello Height also over the weekend. This was before those two SEC pickups over the weekend. USC had already risen to number 3 in the national transfer pickup rankings in terms of acquisitions made in the transfer portal specifically. So you add Shane Lee on top of that, and then assuming you get Caleb Williams, USC will be numero uno, number 1 in the national transfer rankings if Caleb Williams comes. So that just speaks to the instant transformation that Lincoln Riley's making at USC. One other point to make, just as these transfers continue to come in, he said several weeks ago that he wanted to turn over 35 roster spots. And, he might not get there, but the point remains that if you don't set a really big, ambitious goal, you're not going to get anywhere close to it. So, let's say he doesn't get 35. Okay, he gets 25. That's still an amazing turnover in the roster. And it cements that notion that Lincoln Riley and his staff are really intent on pushing the Clay Helton era out. We want our players, our prospects, our commitment, our roster, our philosophy, players who fit what we do, what we want. That process is going along really, really well. There's that level of turnover that Lincoln Riley and his staff are pointing to. And that, Mark, reinforces the ultimate point that the idea of a quick turnaround at USC, doing it in 1 year as opposed to 2. While I don't think we should bank on it, and put all our eggs in that basket and say, oh, it's going to happen. It's inevitable. We shouldn't go that far. But the idea, the credence attached to that notion that USC can do all of this in year 1, it's becoming more credible precisely because of all the activity you're seeing in the transfer portal. It really can remake rosters with that level of significance, that level of scale.
During our live streams and call-in shows, I, on a regular basis, see the live chat humming about recruiting rankings and various fan bases making fun of, poking fun at their recruiting rankings pretty soon. And I'm going to take note of the first time I see somebody bragging about a transfer portal ranking, but it's coming. The day is coming.
And hey, if you're USC and you get Caleb Williams, assuming that does happen at some point this week, and you can say you're number 1 in the transfer portal rankings, that's a pretty big deal. That's definitely something to tout, especially since you want to be at the forefront of the portal every year, knowing how much that can remake your roster, knowing how much that can give you the missing pieces to the puzzle. Like if you have most of a good roster, but you still need those 2 or 3 extra pieces, that's what the transfer portal's for. So touting a transfer portal ranking like that should now become bread and butter. The standard practice in college football in terms of what programs do to market themselves on a national level.
Matt Zemek, Trojans Wire. Got to get on over there and check out his work at Trojans Wire. Matt, we appreciate you stopping by as always.
Thanks, Mark. Have a great week, and maybe we'll have Caleb Williams to talk about next week.